It was an afternoon like any other at the Kuluba Presidential Palace in Ouagadougou, but within those marble walls, history was about to shift irreversibly. On that fateful day, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the military officer turned president of Burkina Faso, met a shocking end, slain at his desk inside the heavily guarded palace, with nearly 200 elite bodyguards stationed nearby. The tale of Ibrahim Traoré is one of dramatic ascension and even more dramatic demise. A young soldier in his 30s, Traoré catapulted into power in September 2022, riding a wave of public frustration with insecurity and poor governance. His popularity surged almost overnight as he presented himself as a man of the people, a patriot ready to confront terrorist threats, challenge neo-colonial control, and restore sovereignty to his long-suffering nation. But in the political landscapes of the Sahel, power is often fleeting. And as Traoré would soon learn, enemies can lurk even in the most fortified corridors of authority. Born in Bondoukoui in western Burkina Faso, Traoré was no stranger to hardship. His rise through the military ranks was quick but hard-earned. He studied geology but chose instead to serve in the army, a decision that would alter the course of his life and, eventually, that of his entire country. Traoré's defining moment came when he overthrew Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba in a swift military coup. That putsch, one of several in Burkina Faso's tumultuous political history, was initially met with resistance, but Traoré's charisma, anti-imperialist rhetoric, and willingness to challenge France's lingering influence endeared him to many. Crowds poured into the streets waving Burkinabe flags, chanting his name, and praising his vision of a self-reliant and secure nation. He purged the old guard, restructured the security apparatus, and formed alliances with Russia's Wagner Group in a bid to fight growing insurgencies without Western interference. His speeches were bold. He spoke of Pan-Africanism, dignity, and the end of puppet leadership. For many, especially the youth, he symbolized hope. But even as he rose to prominence, forces both internal and external began plotting his fall. The tension builds. As months passed, cracks in Traoré's administration began to show. The insurgency continued in the northern provinces. Despite some battlefield victories, terrorist attacks persisted, and civilians suffered. Rumors of discontent within the military began to circulate. His reforms had alienated senior officers. Some felt sidelined. Others resented the foreign alliances, fearing they were trading one form of foreign control for another. At the same time, Traoré's increasingly autocratic style raised eyebrows. Dissent was less tolerated. Independent journalists were arrested. Civil society groups began to voice concerns, albeit cautiously. Meanwhile, foreign powers watched with alarm. His rejection of Western aid, closure of French military bases, and new deals with non-Western powers upset the delicate balance of international relations in the region. But the greatest threat was far closer to home than Traoré ever imagined. The day of the assassination, June 8, 2025. The sun had barely passed its zenith when it happened. Traoré was seated at his desk, reviewing a set of policy documents related to national security restructuring. Around him, aides moved in and out, while the palace remained on high alert, as always. The palace itself was a fortress, with nearly 200 elite soldiers from the Presidential Guard posted throughout the compound. It was considered impenetrable. These men had been selected from across the military for their loyalty, skill, and discipline. They were trained not only to protect but to prevent any possibility of a coup. And yet within that stronghold, the unimaginable unfolded. Multiple reports indicate that the attackers were not external aggressors. They were insiders, soldiers who had sworn allegiance to the very man they would betray. Around 2:43 p.m. local time, gunfire erupted in the west wing of the palace. Witnesses say it lasted less than 3 minutes, but the consequences were irreversible. By the time senior officers reached the president's office, the doors had been forced open, and Traoré lay lifeless in his chair, a pool of blood seeping into the hardwood floor. He had been shot multiple times at close range. The attackers had vanished into the maze-like corridors of the palace, leaving confusion and horror in their wake. Aftermath. The immediate reaction was panic. The presidential Mao Guard was thrown into chaos. Communications were jammed. The national broadcasting station was temporarily blacked out. No one knew who was in control. Within hours, social media exploded with unverified reports. Some said it was a foreign operation. Others blamed a faction of disillusioned officers. A few claimed it was an inside job orchestrated by those closest to him. By nightfall, a curfew had been declared. Troops flooded the streets of Ouagadougou. The capital was quiet, eerily so. A group of senior military officials appeared on national television the next morning. Dressed in full fatigues and surrounded by armed guards, they announced the formation of a transitional council. The statement was brief. They confirmed the death of Captain Ibrahim Traoré in an act of betrayal and vowed to restore order. But the announcement raised more questions than answers. Who had authorized the hit? Why had the bodyguards not acted? Were they complicit or simply caught off guard? Betrayal at the core. What makes the assassination all the more chilling is the sheer proximity of the perpetrators to their victim. These were not distant enemies. They were members of Traoré's own security detail. According to early investigations, a faction within the Guard had been secretly communicating with external agents, possibly military factions aligned with previously ousted leadership or even mercenary forces seeking power. One of Traoré's closest aides who survived the chaos later stated that the president had grown increasingly paranoid in the days leading up to his death. He reportedly changed his daily routines, avoided certain meetings, and kept his inner circle tighter than ever. He sensed something was coming, but he didn't know when or from where. Unfortunately, his fears were not misplaced. Legacy and reflection. The assassination of Ibrahim Traoré is not just the fall of a man, it is the crumbling of a vision. His promises, though lofty and sometimes divisive, had inspired many. He dared to imagine an Africa less dependent on foreign powers. He believed in a sovereign Burkina Faso, capable of defending itself and charting its own course. But dreams alone do not safeguard leaders. In a region plagued by instability, strong men rise quickly and fall just as fast. Traoré's death mirrors that of past revolutionary figures, idealistic, uncompromising, and ultimately betrayed by those closest to them. In the days following his death, tributes poured in from across Africa. Some praised him as a martyr for African independence. Others pointed to his increasingly authoritarian leanings as a sign that his leadership had lost direction. What is undeniable is that he left a mark, a powerful, controversial, and now blood-stained legacy. A nation at the crossroads. Burkina Faso now stands at a crossroads. The Transitional Council, composed of high-ranking military officials, has pledged to hold elections within a year. But few believe such promises in a country where coups have outnumbered constitutional transfers of power. Traoré's supporters have taken to the streets, demanding justice. Protests, though limited by military presence, continue to simmer. Some regions have declared symbolic mourning, painting murals of their fallen leader and holding candlelit vigils. International reactions have been cautious. While global leaders have condemned the violence, few have directly addressed the internal fractures within the Burkinabe military. The African Union and ECOWAS have called for calm and dialogue, but whether their words will have any real effect remains to be seen. The quiet desk. Back at the presidential palace, the office of Captain Ibrahim Traoré remains sealed. The desk, where he took his final breath, is now a silent monument to the risks of revolutionary leadership in a volatile region. The chair he once occupied sits empty. The files he was reading, splattered with blood, have been locked away. His photographs still hang on the walls. In one, he stands in fatigues, raising a clenched fist, a gesture of resistance and pride. In another, he walks among villagers, smiling, a child clutching his hand. These images are reminders of what he hoped to build and what was lost in the violence of betrayal. History will debate the merits of his rule. Was he a savior, a misguided revolutionary, or simply a man who believed too much in the power of ideals? Whatever the verdict, the story of Ibrahim Traoré is now etched in the complex, tragic, and ever unfinished saga of Burkina Faso.